So what is an MES, or manufacturing execution system? Why reintroduce it now? It's not a new term, been floating around since the early 90s, but not everybody's been around since 1993. And for those of us who have been around, we see the other thing. There's an awful lot of buzzwords flying around. So if you're in a world where you hear terms like smart factory, IoT, Industry 4.0, or even Industry 5.0, you might find that the way you interpret those words means certain things that could include what someone like me might call part of an MES kind of toolkit. So what we want to do is zoom in on the E in MES, or manufacturing execution system. And I think that's really important because a lot of the information that's floating around these days about Industry 4 and IoT tends to be very machine-centric, which is absolutely likely to be a part of any real MES type strategy, especially for a firm with reasonably modern equipment and processes. But if you think about execution, that actually refers to a whole lot of things that we should think about first in more general terms, about the business of manufacturing, not necessarily yet worrying about the particular types of tools and technologies and softwares that support it. So what do I mean by the business? Well, in the simplest terms, manufacturing execution is about knowing what you want to make, where you want to make it, how you want to make it, what goes into it, and then alongside that, or as part of it, there comes an understanding of what's worth embedding into the way that you make that helps you understand how you're doing along the way. And then obviously when we think about things like supplier quality and compliance, then there's obviously a need to make sure that we set the stage so that we can know how we did in a variety of different ways to serve the needs of a number of different stakeholders. So in the broadest terms, we should think of manufacturing execution systems as being functionally defined in relation to the work processes that make up making stuff. And it's actually a secondary matter to then ask the question, now that I'm making stuff, when I say manufacturing execution system, is that monolithic? Not necessarily. It's not necessarily something that is about one system. It's not even necessarily a question of displacing things that I already do or displacing tools that I already have. So I think once we get past that initial hiccup of thinking about business process first, technology second, then we can get into a bit of a breakdown that says, okay, from a functional perspective, MES has got some fairly distinct areas where it's supposed to provide some level of support in ways that probably weren't possible or easy prior to the birth of the technology-enabled MES system tools that started coming into the market in the late 80s and early 90s. The good news and the bad news about MESs is everybody's got one. Now, some of you might be asking yourselves, really? I don't recall investing in a particular MES tool. And the reason I say you've already got one is you need one. And it doesn't matter if it's management by walking around, because the bosses know what's in their head. It doesn't matter if it's a bunch of Excel spreadsheets used for everything from planning to taking rough tallies of throughput. It doesn't matter if it's a user-friendly barcode scanning and simple data entry front end that's been put onto your ERP system but then deployed to the shop floor, or if you've invested with what the actual vendor would describe as an MES, you've got one. The question is it something that supports all of the functional areas that need support? Is it something that makes elegant use of data and investments you've made in other systems? Is it something that is coherently able to follow the life cycle of raw materials as they go through all the steps and stages that become a product? And is it something that actually allows you to define those manufacturing stages, the equipment used to support them, the materials that flow into them, and the people that work around them in ways that lend itself to reporting and analysis and investigation in the ways that the business needs? And I think that leads us into a question of what is a good MES?